Hello, and thank you once again for joining me on my program. Tonight I'm continuing on with my teaching on healings and miracles. I believe so many of us in this hour need either one. And God can supply our need, and He wants us to learn how to step into that victorious life of receiving from Him. Tonight I've entitled my message, It's Time to Remember. It's time to remember. I'm going to be talking about even my own personal time of miracles, because I'm going to be remembering tonight. You know, maybe I'm the one that needed tonight's message. But when we're in a need for that miracle, sometimes we get so caught up in the frenzy of life. You know, our calendar can become so full, and maybe it's filled with doctor appointments, or maybe it's filled with meeting with the bankers, or whatever it is. And it becomes so busy that we don't have time to stop and really begin to remember who we are in the kingdom of God. So what do? Well, we probably have a plan A. A plan A. This is what I'm going to do. And we sit down and we kind of figure that out. I want us to talk about two kinds of plans, and we're really going to focus on one, but there are two kinds of plans. One is man's plan, and one is God's plan. If man has made the plan, if we did without consulting God or feeling like it came from God, then go ahead and create a plan B, C, D, E, and on down the line. Because it's probably going to be filled with potholes, problems that we do not expect, nor is there anyone looking out. You see, God has a plan, and He's got every piece of it covered in advance. But so often we get ourselves in a situation at looking plan A, man's version. I want us to concentrate on plan A, God's version. Personally, I'm on a faith walk right now. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There's nothing more exciting than being on a faith walk. During the faith walk period of our life, testimonies are being formed deep inside of us. Remembrances are being built. Memories are being built deep inside of us, the kind that you don't forget. There's a stretching going on. There's a reaching out and faith where you see way down there. You see what God is going to do, but right now what you have is this, but you see that. I spoke last week on expectancy. We must continue in our faith walk to have I expect to get over here. Right now I'm right here, but I expect with all my heart, so much so that my plan goes all the way over there. My plan does not stop here. If my plan stops here, I've lost my expectancy. We can never do that. Go back to the Word, and God will restore that expectancy within you. As I said, I'm on a faith walk. You see, sometimes when we're moving forward in that faith walk, we don't have a clue what God's going to do. We know where we're going because He's already showed us. But the journey from here to there, well, that's that faith walk. It's exciting. There's nothing like it. It's the greatest time of feeling like you're in the presence of the Almighty. It's the greatest time of feeling like God's holding your hand, like He's carrying you at times, and seeing things that you know you had nothing to do with, and yet there it is. My husband and I, we have a phrase, we say it was not on our radar. When God comes through for us, we had thoughts of how we might get out here. We always do. Thoughts of how we would work our way toward what God has shown us. And then what happens? Why, God comes in way up above over here and lands. You see, he's bigger than our imagination. And he uses tools that we know not of. He's a creative God, and he knows how to come in above our radar or below our radar. All I know is stay close to him, stay focused, because a faith walk is so exciting. As I said, there's two kinds of plans, man's and God's. I want to talk tonight on God's plan, and I want to give you an example. Whenever I was in my weak moment of a faith walk, God began to say to me, look at stones of remembrance. You know, stones of remembrance, that's those stones of our memory that we have kept forever. You can just mention it, and there it is. It's like it was yesterday. We could remember it, and we can tell about it. We can talk about it. So in your weakness, God says, go back to the stones of remembrance. Joshua was told to do that when he crossed the river Jordan. He said, go back and collect one stone from each of the tribes and bring it from that dry riverbed that was only dry as they crossed over. Bring it over here, and then one day your children will say to you, what are these about? And you will tell them about the goodness of the Lord. And then there was in Ecclesiastes, Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 5, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. There are times when we need to cast away some stones of remembrance. They're not helpful, they're harmful. But then there are times, God's stones, that we need to hold on to and embrace them. And that's what he's told me. So tonight I'm going to share one of my own remembrance stones. Jack and I were a young couple, married with, we had 2 little girls. We were in South Carolina and we had orders for Korea. My husband did unaccompanied tour to Korea. Now, an unaccompanied tour means the government is not going to pay for the spouse and family to move over. Whatever country that he's being sent to, the government basically says, spouse and children, y'all stay right here in the U.S. So my husband and I, finances were very tight, and we decided that I would go back to my mother's, and I would move in with Mother during his year in Korea. With my 2 little girls, that way I would have help, and Mother was all for that. Before we were to go, one night, during the night, the Lord awakened me, and he told me to go to Korea. I sat up in bed, and I woke up Jack, and I said, Jack, I need to go to Korea. Jack said, no, and he was half asleep. He said, lay down, we've already decided, go to sleep. I went back to sleep. The Lord woke me up again, go to Korea. I sit up in bed and I wake Jack up and I said, honey, I need to go to Korea. No, go back to sleep. We've already talked about this, go back to sleep. You're going to your mom's. Okay, I lay down. 3rd time, the Lord says, you're going to Korea. 3rd time, I wake up Jack and I said, honey, I'm going to Korea because the Lord told me to go. He said, you're going to Korea, we'll talk about it in the morning. Well, we did. You see, I had heard the voice of the Lord, so suddenly my plan that I thought was plan A was out the window. When God gives you the plan, whatever your plan was, put it aside, forget it. You began to walk in the faith walk that he suddenly cast you in. So we knew that waiting this late, there were immunizations, there was passport for me and the girls, airline tickets, of money we didn't have. Everybody began to say, "You're crazy. You can't do that. You've waited too long. Why didn't you do this a long time ago if you were going to go?" I said, "Well, I thought I was going to Mom's until the Lord told me different. But now I've got to go." So my husband went to the bank. Well, first he went to the airlines and they quoted a price for the tickets. And then he went to the bank, filled out all the paperwork, went through the interview, got a loan for the exact amount of our tickets. We didn't want to go into any more debt, the exact amount. The day following getting the money in his hand, he goes back to the airlines. And they say, "Well, you know, it's been a few days and our prices went up. You don't have enough money." My husband came home and it was at lunch hour. And I had just put the two girls down for their naps. They were 1.5 and 3 years old. And I had just put them down for their nap. So it was just Jack and I, and he said, "Honey, I couldn't get the tickets. I don't have enough money." I began to cry. Folks, I was boo-hooing. And my husband had to get back. He was military and he had to get back to his office. He said, "I hate leaving you like this." Like, "Oh, come on." And I just kept bawling. And the girls were asleep. So he goes and I hear the door shut and I just go over and I sit on my couch and I'm just boo-hooing big time. I mean, there's no stopping. And suddenly, from the other side of the living room, I hear a voice. "Who are you?" Yeah, you would think that that'd be enough to catch my attention. But what I did do was out loud, I said my first and last name. Out loud. I answered the voice. And then I went right back into my hysterical crying. And then I heard again, "Who are you?" You would think round two might have stopped me, but no. I answered out loud. I gave my first name, I gave my middle name, I gave my maiden name, and I gave my last name. And then I went right back to crying. A third time. "Who are you?" But this time the Lord knew I had already given every name I owned. And he said, "You're a child of the King." He had my undivided attention. That third time with the answer, reminder, "You're a child of the King." I stopped my pity party. I stopped my bawling. I got really angry at Satan. I took the same energy I had been crying out with my pity party, and I threw that against Satan himself, and I turned around and I knelt at that couch like an altar. And I prayed this prayer. I said, "Satan, not only am I going to Korea, I'm going to live royally while I'm there. And there's nothing you can do that can stop me because God told me to go." That's it. Now then, when I got up, I felt a ton of, like a weight had been lifted off of me. Well, you know the story. The immunizations that the girls had to have and that I had to have, we reacted so well to it, the doctor said, "I have no problem upping the schedule. Let's get them done." Not one of us had a problem with our immunizations. The passport that's supposed to take so many weeks came back in record time. Nobody around us had gotten one back anywhere in that time frame. And then the airlines. They called my husband and they said, "We quoted you that other fee. And you know, we talked, and we've decided we're going to honor that. If you'll come back up here, we will sell those tickets to you at the quoted price." My husband still had the money. You know, he went running to that airport. He got those tickets. Back then you didn't do it online. He got those tickets. So the passport the immunizations, the airlines, and so many other things just began to fall into place. But I used a word in that prayer that I never had used before. I knew that I was speaking prophetic because I'd never used it before. It wasn't my language. I said, not only am I going, but I'm going to live royally. I don't pray like that. And it even rang in my ear. Well, my husband had to go on to Korea, and I was to follow. He gets over there and discovers that there is a 6-month waiting list in Seoul, Korea, where I would stay, for any of the Americanized apartments. 6 months. And now he writes back, and we both agreed, well, let's just trust God. He's done everything else. And so we began to pray, and that night, or one of those nights soon right after the letter, an officer comes and he talks to my husband, and he says, you know, I've been invited to a Korean lawyer's house when there's diplomats there, and I just don't want to go by myself. Any of you guys want to go with me? Well, my husband said, it's free dinner, I'll go. You have to know my husband. If it's free dinner, I'll go. He went to the dinner, and while there, a British diplomat stood up and he said, may I ask something among you? I have to go back to England with my family. I have a home that I don't want to lose. It's too hard to get one when I return, so I'd rather keep it. I will sub-rent it to anyone. My husband said, me. And so they talked, and he made it the rent that we were expecting to pay. I have a feeling it was much more, but he made it the rent we could pay. And then he told my husband, he said, you know, I've got this Christian live-in maid. She speaks really good English. I don't want to lose her. May I leave her and let her be your maid, and I'll pay her wages? My husband said, absolutely. Now I had somebody, a Christian, living in the house with me. But the story gets even more detailed, because you see his house, the British diplomat, he lived next door to the Thailand ambassador. We had a long driveway. Well, the Thailand ambassador had to be guarded. To do that, they guarded my driveway so that he was protected on all sides. I was guarded, armed guards at the foot of my driveway every day. Well, the diplomat, the wife, she didn't want this lady that was moving in with her 2 children to feel abandoned. And so she talked to all of her British diplomat friends and said, don't let Dee and her children feel left there. So they said, okay. I was invited weekly to the tea and crumpets with the British diplomats. Now, I didn't have transportation, and they did. They would send their black limousines with flags flying often and pick me up and take me to their home. You know, the more I think about it, I lived pretty royally. I was treated like royalty. I know I told you there was a 6-month waiting list. Well, when the dear gentleman came back from England at 3 months, Jack and I were praying. We knew that we had been told 6 months. My husband, 1 week before this lease is up, or this sub-rent is up, my husband gets a call and they say, we don't know how it's happened, but you're next on the waiting list. 1 week before this one goes out, this one opened up. I just moved into the next one. It was the apartment complex next door to this house. I lived royally. Now, let me tell you, when God has a visitation and He says you're to do something, He has every single step, down to the living quarters, down to the maid, the one that would help with all the language barrier, the transportation, the watching over you, so totally planned out. God's plan has got everything in detail. And so here I am on a faith walk. You know, by the time I remembered and wrote this, my faith didn't feel one bit weak anymore. My faith had been restored, strengthened, and encouraged. I still saw the vision down there, but it had gotten where all the little, remember last week I talked about facts? All the little facts were showing up. But I knew God had called me over there. And suddenly I could see over the facts, and I could see the truth, because I had a stone of remembrance. I know that as I speak to Christians, you've had stones of remembrance. I am not unique nor special. I am God's child, and so are you. You've got many stones of remembrance. When you're in those journeys of faith walks, go back. Look at your stones of remembrance. Let God begin to speak to you. Now, here's a test. If we're looking at all the problems of our current situation and our talk, our conversation, it's about a plan B, a plan B. You know what that says? Well, in case plan A doesn't work, we need to have a plan B. God doesn't do it that way. Faith walk doesn't go that way. When God gives you plan A, you do not need plan B. Do you understand? You do not need plan B. That is man interfering with God's plan. Man wants to pull God's plan A out of the picture and detour you to a plan B, where the out from under the covering of the blessing. This was there was a blessing the entire way, every step of the way. My Father took care of me, his daughter, all the way. But when we began to do a plan B, when God has clearly given a plan A, be careful, because you're letting yourself be weakened. Go back to your stone of remembrance. Go back and look at the times when God has always come through, and he's worked that plan in your life before. Sometimes we need to do this. Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. In other words, I am God, and I will show myself strong. I will be exalted in both the nations around you and in the earth. All things that your feet will trod, I will be exalted. Begin to recall those times of the past, just like I did. You know, my husband and I, we are early bird people. If I have an appointment at 11 and it takes me 30 minutes to travel to that appointment, I'll probably leave close to an hour early. Well, you never know. There might be a train, a school bus, a road detour, an accident on the way that I may have to wait in line to travel around. You don't know. And so my husband and I, we like to start out early so that we don't miss it. The reason I bring that up is because sometimes when we're looking at that vision way out there, and there are these little facts that are right here, and we're praying against these to be removed, and we're thinking, God, don't you see these? You see, God knows the appointed times that he's given to us when we have to have something. God does not need to leave an hour early to get to anything. God is there already. He said, I'll go before you. God is already there. He doesn't need to leave early. We are so used to being early that we expect God to. He doesn't have to stop at the detour and go this way and go that way. God is there. Sometimes we want Him to act like us instead of us to act like Him. I remember the road to Emmaus. The disciples were walking the road on their way to Emmaus, and Jesus joins them. This is right after His resurrection. They're bemoaning the fact that the man that they had trusted and thought would surely be their new Savior, their King, was killed. Now they needed to go to a plan B. They were lost sight of plan A, the kingdom, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. They lost sight of that. Now they needed to go back to a plan B for their life. Jesus is with them, and they don't even recognize it, no more than I did in that living room that day. I can relate to those disciples. But Jesus, when He breaks bread with us, the Word, He begins to once again reveal Himself strong. And they said our spirits burned within us when we were with Him. Well, a stone of remembrance always for them when Jesus was walking on the road to Emmaus. A stone of remembrance when Jesus stepped into my living room, and a voice that I heard on the other side of the room. Who are you? I would ask you 3 times tonight, who are you? Our first gut reaction is to say our first and last name. Maybe the second time we might say our first, middle, last, maiden, and last. But on that third time, tonight, will you receive from God Almighty, you are a child of the King. What do you need from your Father tonight? It's always been about miracles and healings. He's here with you tonight, speaking to you. Who are you? A child of the King. Quit letting Satan whip you. Quit letting the facts override the truth. Quit letting the things that are bothering you keep you awake. Take them to the Father, your Father. You're a child of the King. You know, I thank you for joining me, and next week I will bring another message, miracles and healings. Trust Him tonight with yours. God bless you.
We hope you've enjoyed Kingdom Ministries with Reverend Dee Levens. For more from Dee, read The Long, Long Night, The Story of Destiny, and Echoes from God, a Christian study book for growing deep and strong in the faith. Connect with Dee and purchase her books at deelevens.com. Send an email to deelevenstv@gmail.com or text Dee at 254-681-6099.